All right. Well, for the past two nights, you have heard from the message brought to you by two members here at Plainview. But tonight we decided to bring out the big guns and call in the special forces. Um, we have Brother Dan Chambers going to be preaching the word to us. He preaches at the Concord Church of Christ in Brentwood, Tennessee. Dan has been preaching for more than 25 years in full-time ministry. In addition to his preaching and teaching ministry, Dan also likes to dabble in writing books on theology. He received his Doctor of Ministry degree in Applied Theology from Southern Seminary, and he also has advanced degrees in Biblical Studies from Indiana University. He met his wife, Leola, when they were both undergraduate students at Lipscomb University in the late 80s, and they have two grown children. On the personal side, Dan likes hiking, reading historical fiction, and plotting new travel adventures with his wife, Leola. Brother Dan.
Well, it is great to be here with you. I have been in this business for actually about 35 years, and I have never been called the big guns. I've never been called the special forces, and I promise you that I am neither. But I really appreciate that gracious introduction. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. Thank you so much to the eldership, the ministry staff for their willingness to bring me down and to lead you in some Bible study. There's nothing more that I love than to do that. My wife is with me tonight. I'm so glad. She always makes things better when she's able to come, which she tries everything in her power to be able to do that, to adjust her work schedule and do that. And so she's with me tonight, and I'm so glad. Sitting next to her is my good friend Glenn Record. Glenn is an elder, of course, at Meridianville. Many of you know him, and he and I go back to the end of our Lipscomb days, and it is always nice when I see Glenn again. We don't get to see each other very often, but it's always a pleasure when I get to run into Glenn, we get to catch up, and I just appreciate who he is and all that he does for the kingdom. I've enjoyed meeting several of you tonight. I look forward to meeting more of you, not only tonight, but also tomorrow as we talk about the good life. We're going to start talking about it tonight. We're going to talk about it tomorrow as well, tomorrow morning, and I hope that all of you will be back with us then. Well, before we get started in our lesson tonight, one of the things that I always like to do is ask God to bless our time together, and so if you don't mind, let's bow. Father, what a joy it is to be here. What a pleasure it is always to be among your people and to be able to open your word. And we are so blessed to know that you have put your thoughts in words that we can understand. You revealed yourself to us. You revealed your will for us. And we are so thankful for that gracious word. And we pray, Father, for the next few moments, as we spend some time in your word, that, Father, we will be inspired, that we will be instructed, that we will be prompted to think, that we will adjust our lives if necessary in our pursuit of you. And so it's in the name of Jesus we would ask you to bless these few moments that we spend in study together, and we say amen. Well, there was a movie that came out. It's been about 30 years now. And you know, occasionally these movies will come out and they just kind of reach iconic status and kind of become cult classics. And one of those movies was made in 1993, and the movie that I'm thinking about, and I'm going to guess, I don't think I'm going too far out on a limb here when I say that I'm going to guess that anybody in this audience that is, over 40 probably has seen the movie Groundhog Day, and it starred Bill Murray. And so if you haven't seen Groundhog Day, let me just tell you a little bit about Groundhog Day. Bill Murray in Groundhog Day plays a weatherman, and his name's Phil Connors in the movie. And the whole premise of the movie is that he is stuck living in February the 2nd. He lives February the 2nd, Groundhog Day, in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, over and over and over again. He goes there. That's, of course, the main location of the festival of Groundhog Day. That's the epicenter of that event. And so after that event, he goes to bed. And if you've seen the movie, 6 o'clock came the next morning. At least he thought it was the next morning. His clock radio was there with the flip numbers. A lot of you remember that. We all had our clock radio back in the 80s and 90s and the numbers that flip over. And so the clock flipped to 6 o'clock in the morning. And the sounds of the DJ was talking and he was saying something. And as he was getting ready to get out of bed and a new day was beginning to dawn. But the thing was, it was February 2nd again. And it was the same words coming from the same person that he had heard yesterday. And when he walked out of his house, everything was the same. Every person was in the same place. Every person said the same thing. Every person was doing the very same thing. The only one that did anything different was Phil Connors, was Bill Murray. And so he found himself stuck in this, what would become quickly a monotonous prison. And so the whole movie really revolves around, how do I cope with this? How do I cope with this monotonous, unending cycle of sameness? And so he'd go through the day, he'd come home at night, he'd go to bed, and the next morning, when that clock radio flipped 6, the same man would be saying the same thing that was said the day before. And he'd go outside, and everybody would be there just like they were the day before, in the same place, doing the same thing, saying the very same words. As he faced the despair of this unending cycle of boredom, he tries to figure out, what can I do to give meaning to my life? What can I do to bring some fulfillment and satisfaction to life? How can I possibly live the good life in this monotonous prison? And so he begins to pursue the good life. And he begins to think about it, and he thinks, well, what I'll do every day is I'll just indulge all of my fleshly impulses. And so that's what he did. He'd go to the same diner every day. Everybody would be sitting there just like they were the day before, saying the very same things that they did the day before, doing exactly what they had been doing the day before. He would take his seat, and so he just decided, I'll just eat everything. I mean, how great is that? Because nothing really matters. Tomorrow will start all over again in this monotonous prison, and so it doesn't really matter. And so he's just shoving in the pastries, and he's just gorging himself on anything that he sees that he wants. Why not? The waitress brings a pot of coffee to him. And he just, instead of picking up the pot and pouring it in the cup, he just takes the pot and drinks it right out of the pot. Why not? Tomorrow's going to be the same. What does it really matter? He decides, okay, I'll just take up smoking. Why not? And so he just starts chain smoking. It doesn't matter, because the next day, it's just going to start all over again. He runs into a man. It's the same man that he runs into every day. The same place, the same conversation. He's very annoying. And eventually he says, I've got this impulse to just slug this guy. And so one day he just decides, I'm going to slug the guy. And he does. He punches him. Why not? It doesn't matter. Tomorrow it's going to start all over again. He sees a woman. He likes her. He says, I think I'll seduce her. Well, why not? It doesn't really matter. It's going to all be the same again tomorrow. And so that's what he does. He indulges all of his impulses. If there is an itch that wants to be scratched, he scratched it. but he couldn't find any satisfaction. He never found any real meaning and fulfillment in that. And so he decided, well, maybe the answer, maybe the good life is found in greed. And so he decided, what I'll do the next day, I'll just rob an armored car. Because every day is the exact same. And so he was able to watch this armored car because he got up every day and he was able to kind of case it and watch what happened every day. Nothing changed. It was the same day that he was stuck in, February the 2nd. And so once he saw it enough and on enough days, he robbed the armored car. And he took the money and he bought a new car and he bought new clothes and he lived a life that he could never have lived before. And he thought, maybe that's where I'll find satisfaction and fulfillment in this monotonous prison. But that didn't help. That wasn't the solution. He still felt terribly empty. There was no fulfillment. There was no ultimate satisfaction. There was nothing really good about it. And so he was just full of despair at this point. And so he thought, why am I living in this monotonous prison? I think I'll just check out. I think I'll just kill myself. And so he did. Many times. And every time that he did, 6 o'clock rolled around the next day. The clock radio goes off. The same voice saying the same thing on the radio. Everybody doing the same thing, saying the same thing in the same places every day. One day he decided, I'll just drive my car off this cliff. And he plunges to his fiery death. Wakes up the next day, February 2nd, in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. Then he decides, well, I'll just electrocute myself in the bathtub. And he did that. And he woke up the next day, February 2nd, Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. Threw himself off a tall building the next day, and he woke up the next morning, 6 o'clock, in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. That didn't work. Well, he decided, what I'll do is maybe I just need to expand my knowledge, become more well-rounded, become more educated, learn new things. Maybe that's where I'll find fulfillment. Maybe that's where I'll find satisfaction. Maybe that's where I'll find the good life. And so he began to increase his knowledge. He began to pursue things. He became a great pianist. He became a sculptor. He specialized in ice sculpture. He studied French poetry. He did all of those things. And there was just no ultimate satisfaction. There wasn't any fulfillment at all. Well, that movie's 30 years old, like I said. Came out in 1993, and since that time, there have been a lot of people who have made this observation. They've said, our lives are a lot more like the movie Groundhog Day than we probably care to admit. Sometimes it just seems like our life is stuck in a monotonous prison. It just seems like the same things over and over. We wake up and it's just the same. What are you going to do Monday? What are you going to do Monday when you wake up? I'll tell you what I'm going to do Monday when I wake up. I'll wake up between 4 and 5 a.m. I will shuffle into the bathroom. I will brush my teeth. And then I will shave. I've showered the night before after my run, so I go straight to the shaving after I brush my teeth. I will put my shaving cream on. I'll start over here and then cover this side of my face, this side of my neck, go to this side of the neck and up on the face. That's how I'll do it. Then I'll get my razor and I'll start here and I'll work my way this way and down and over and up. And then this side of my face and then that side of my face. That's what I'm going to do Monday. And then what I'll do, I'll walk into my closet and I will choose either this pair of khaki pants or that pair of khaki pants. And then, after I choose one of those two pairs of khaki pants, I will choose one of 5 polo shirts. I'll either choose a green polo, I'll choose a blue polo, I'll choose a black polo, I'll choose kind of a blue-green polo or a gray polo. And they'll be monogrammed Concord Road Church of Christ. I'll put that on. I'll make my way to the office. It'll be somewhere between 6 and 6:30 that I get there. I'll eat a bowl of cereal when I get there. One bowl of cereal. One bowl of Great Grains cereal with almond milk. I'll do that. And then I'll sit there. I'll check the headlines. I'll do Wordle on my phone. And then I'll do Quirtle on my phone while I'm eating my cereal. Secretary will come in about 8 o'clock. I will go down to her office, or she'll come to my office, and we'll chat for a little bit. We call it our staff meeting, but we're just really shooting the breeze. It may be 10 minutes. It may be 15 minutes. It may be 30 minutes. It may be a little bit more. And then I will get out and start working on lessons. And I'll work on my lessons to about 11 o'clock. And then 11 o'clock is lunchtime for me. So I'll go home for lunch. If I don't have any appointments, I'll get something to eat. I'll take about a 20-minute nap. I'll go back to the building. I'll work the rest of the day. After that, on the way home, I'll stop by Smith Park. I'll run 4 miles on the trails. I'll go home. If Leola's working, she's a labor and delivery nurse, 3 days a week she'll be working. If she's working, I'll find something to eat. I'll do some chores around the house. When she gets home, there's a good possibility that we'll do a 4-mile power walk. And then when we get in, I'll shower and we'll plop down on the couch. We'll watch TV and go to bed. That's what I'm going to do Monday. You know what I'm going to do Tuesday? Same thing. That's how life is, right? It's just almost this, monotonous prison. It's just this unending cycle of drudgery. You know, there was a man a long time ago, and he found himself in this cycle of drudgery. He found himself in this same kind of monotonous prison. And he was determined to find the good life. He was determined to find fulfillment. He was determined to find happiness. He was determined to find satisfaction. And what was so unique about this guy is he had the power, and he had the money, and he had the time to literally try everything, to go anywhere and to do anything in his quest for the good life, in his quest for fulfillment, his quest for satisfaction. In fact, he kept a journal of his quest. He tells all about this quest, everything that he did in search of the good life. And he talked about how he felt before he started the search. And he talked about how he felt after he completed the search. And here's what's really cool about this guy who lived long ago, who kept this journal in his quest for the good life. The cool thing is, we can all read it. It's out there and it's available for every person to read. The man, his name was Solomon. And the journal that he kept is the book of Ecclesiastes. And so if you've got your Old Testaments with you, let's just turn over there and let's just take a look at this man's journal who is searching for the good life. Now it starts like this. It says, the words of the preacher. Some translations will say the words of the teacher. And it's the same thing. And then it tells who the preacher and the teacher is. He's the son of David. He's the king in Jerusalem. That's Solomon. Now, I'm going to go ahead and tell you how he felt before he tried to find the good life and how he felt after he tried to find the good life. You probably already know this because, this is a Saturday night crowd, and you're probably familiar with the book of Ecclesiastes. But here's how he felt before he started his quest. He felt awful. He was full of despair. He was despondent. He was disillusioned at life. Although he had all the money that he could hope for, there was just something missing. There wasn't fulfillment, and there wasn't lasting satisfaction. And then let me tell you how he felt after his quest. He felt the same way. He was disappointed. He was disillusioned. He was depressed. Because there was just nothing, even after he tried everything, there was nothing that brought lasting satisfaction. Absolutely nothing. Now, I want you to see how he begins his journal. He begins it with a very famous refrain. Take a look at it. It's in verse 2. It says, "Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity." Okay, let's just kind of pause there. You're going to see that expression a lot in his journal. Vanity of vanities. Some translations say futility of futility. Some might say meaninglessness of meaninglessness. Now you need to understand something about that construction, that grammatical construction. In the Hebrew language that this is originally written in, this is how they formed in the Hebrew language a comparative. Every language has comparatives and superlatives. Now, what I mean by that is this. For instance, we use the word fast. He's fast. Well, the comparative for fast is faster. He's fast. He's faster. These two compared, he's faster than this person. The superlative of fast is fastest. He's fast. He's faster. He's the fastest. Well, this is how the Hebrew forms the superlative. It's kind of like the word you'll see in Scripture, the description of that room in the tabernacle or the temple, the Holy of Holies. Well, what does that mean? That means this is the holiest place that there is on the face of the earth. That's what it means. It's because God's presence was there. That's where the Ark of the Covenant was. That's where the mercy seat was. That was the one place that the high priest could go in once a year on the Day of Atonement and make atonement for the sins of the people. That was the holiest place on the planet. It was there that God symbolically dwelt among His people. His presence came to rest there when the tabernacle and the temple was completed, the Holy of Holies. So what does he mean when he says vanity of vanities? Well, he's talking about life here. And so what he means when he says vanity of vanities, he says, let me describe life for you. There is nothing more meaningless than human existence. That's what he means. When you think of all the meaningless things in life, the most meaningless of all is human existence. The most futile of all is human existence. The most vain of all is just human existence. Now, the word here, vanities, it literally means like a vapor or breath, is what the word literally means. As, you know, the idea here is like a puff of smoke or maybe a hot breath on a cold morning. It just appears for a very short time and then it's gone. And that's the idea with life. We're born and we're just not here very long. And then we just go away. That's the idea. And he says, this is what life is like. This is human existence. Now, what he does is he asks a question and he's going to prove his point. The question is this, verse 3. What advantage does a man have in all of his work? What good does it do you? All this activity that you do, all of these things that you pursue, all of these works that you're engaged in, what benefit is it ultimately? And then what he does right after that, he he answers the question himself beginning in verse 4. And what he does is he points to the repetitive cycles of nature to make his point. Look at verse 5. He says in verse 4, a generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. Also the sun rises and the sun sets, and hastening to its place, it rises there again. He says, look at the sun. It comes up and it goes down. It comes up and it goes down. It just comes up and it goes in circles and it goes back again, and it doesn't really accomplish anything, and you can almost hear the monotony in his voice. And then he says, here in verse 6, or think about the wind. He says, blowing toward the south, then turning again toward the north, the wind continues swirling along on its circular courses. The wind returns, the wind comes and the wind blows, and it just keeps circulating. That's all it does. That's it. You can almost hear the boredom. You can almost see the boredom in it. And then he says in verse 7, all the rivers flow into the sea, and yet the sea is not full. He says, look around. All of these rivers just pour and pour and pour into the sea. But what does it accomplish? It stays at the same level. It doesn't really change anything. It's just busy, and it's not accomplishing anything. And so that's the point that he's trying to make. He's saying the universe is trapped in this cycle of meaninglessness, this cycle of activity where absolutely nothing is accomplished. And he says human existence mirrors that. That's what human life looks like. You know, I know you ask people this question, and you get asked this question. What you up to? And you know, when I ask people that question, a standard answer is same old, same old. Same old, same old. And that's the standard answer because that's just kind of how life is. It's just same old, same old. There's just kind of like a frustrating rhythm to it all, right? That's just the nature of life. You know, I think about the fact that you go into the kitchen and the dishes are in the sink and you put the dishes up and you clean the dishes and they come back. That's just the way it works. They just keep coming back. The laundry. You do the laundry, and I don't know how it is at your house. At my house, I'm kind of the laundry savant. I don't know what it is. I don't mind doing laundry. I like to do laundry. When I see a basket that's pretty full, I pick it up and I go do the laundry. And so there's times I'll be walking through the house with a basket of laundry and Leola will go, didn't you just do a load? And I'll go, yes, they're back. They're back. It's just the nature of life. It just keeps coming back. Didn't you just pay that bill? Yeah. What happened? It came back. Didn't you just cut the grass? Well, yeah. Well, what happened? Well, it came back. The haircuts, they keep going. It keeps coming back. The beards keep having to be trimmed. That's just the nature and the cycle of life. Everything. And he says, look at the sun. That's just how it works. The wind is how it works. Look at the rivers. That's just how it works. And so we face this cycle of monotony in life, and we sometimes are trying to figure out how can we break out of it and find the good life? How can we break out of it? How can we get beyond it and find some real deep satisfaction and happiness? And well, we know how people do that a lot. They'll get into their midlife and they'll have what they might call a midlife crisis. Try to find something to cope with the monotony of life. They may have an affair. They may decide they're going to quit their job and they're going to take another job, change careers, move to a different state. And you know what they find out? That new job eventually becomes just as monotonous as the old job. That new relationship, well, the newness wears off and it becomes just as monotonous as the old relationship. That new state, exciting for a time, but it becomes just like the other state. All of it eventually becomes exactly the same way. And so we find ourselves like the preacher here, just struggling, trying to find something. Look at verse 8 here. He says, all things are wearisome. Man is not able to tell it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor is the ear filled with hearing. We're trying to look at something. We're trying to hear something that's going to bring us satisfaction. You know, and so we binge on Netflix and something, or Hulu, or Disney Plus, or Apple TV, or Paramount Plus, or, you know, YouTube. There's always another show to see, or music. Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music. There's always another song to hear. There's always another game to play. Looking, as we look, try to find a good life and happiness and fulfillment and satisfaction. You know, I told you that this man, Solomon, that he had the money, he had the power and the time to try everything to find the good life. And when I said that, that wasn't an understatement. That wasn't an overstatement. That was not exaggeration at all. He literally could do anything. Take a look at chapter 2. He tells us what he did. He said, I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure. So enjoy yourself. Kind of sounds like Phil Connors from Groundhog Day. And behold, it too was futility. I said of laughter, it is madness, and of pleasure. What does it accomplish? He said, maybe the secret is in laughter. And so he went to all the comedy clubs to try to find fulfillment and satisfaction and happiness, and it didn't work. All the pleasure, it didn't work. He said in verse 3, I explored with my mind how to stimulate my body with wine while my mind was guiding me wisely, and how to take hold of folly until I could see what good there is for the sons of men to do under the heavens for the few years of their lives. I partied. I indulged every impulse that I had. He says in verse 4, I enlarged my works. I built houses for myself. I planted vineyards for myself. He threw himself into his work. Maybe that's where I'll find fulfillment. That's where I'll find the good life. That's where I'll find satisfaction. That next house that's bigger, that's in that more desirable neighborhood, that has all of those newest conveniences, that's where it's going to be. That vacation home. He did all of that. The vineyard, he just threw himself into landscaping, and he was able to just develop the most incredible landscapes. Maybe that's where he'll find fulfillment and satisfaction. He says, nope. Look at verse 5. I made gardens and parks for myself, and I planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made ponds of water for myself from which to irrigate a forest of growing trees. Then he tried servants, slavery. I bought male and female slaves, and I had homeborn slaves. I possessed flocks and herds larger than all who preceded me in all Jerusalem. I just stacked up all kinds of things, and I was so wealthy, and I had farms bigger than any farmer in the area. He said, I collected for myself, verse 8, silver and gold, the treasures of kings and provinces. I provided for myself male and female singers and the pleasures of men, many concubines. I became great and increased more than all who preceded me in Jerusalem. My wisdom also stood by me. I became smart. I developed myself intellectually. See, he did all of that. He said in verse 10, all that my eyes desired, I did not refuse them. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure, for my heart was pleased because of all my labor, and this was reward for all of my labor. Thus I considered all my activities which my hands had done, and the labor which I had exerted, and behold, all was vanity. All was meaningless. All was futile and striving after the wind, and there was no profit under the sun. Wow. There you go. That's what I mean. When he records his journal for us, he was depressed and despondent before his search for the good life and for meaning, and he was despondent and disillusioned after his search. I mean, look at his philosophy of life. It's in verse 9 of chapter 1. That which has been is that which will be, and that which has been done is that which will be done. So there is nothing new under the sun. And he goes on to say in verse 11, there is no remembrance of earlier things and also of the later things which will occur. There will be for them no remembrance among those who will come later still. Well, there you go. There's a philosophy of life for you. We're all just on a hamster wheel. And we're going to live and we're going to die unremembered. You know, I don't know who my great-great-great-grandparents were. I don't know. I don't know them. Maybe some of you who are interested in genealogy, maybe you know their name, but they've been forgotten. And I'm going to be forgotten. Listen, that's how life is. That's what he says. That's how it works. You punch in and you punch out until you punch out for the last time. And then when you punch out for the last time, you know, your company will throw you a little party and have a little cake for you and give you a little gift, and then you'll go home and they'll replace you, and life continues and the business continues, and you will be ultimately forgotten. You're welcome. You're welcome. Wow, you know, so faced with that bleak reality, you say, this is pretty depressing. Yeah, it really is, isn't it? It's a pretty bleak reality. Just like Phil Connors on Groundhog Day. Every day that he got up, it was just a bleak reality. Faced with that bleak reality, Solomon searches for meaning. He searches for purpose. He searches for the good life, and there is absolutely nothing that satisfies. So what is the purpose of Ecclesiastes? Is it just to tell us that? Is that the purpose of it? Now that we've all been thoroughly depressed, is that the purpose of it? Well, no, that's not the purpose of Ecclesiastes. The first thing that the writer of Ecclesiastes wants us to do, the first thing that Solomon wants us to do in this journal, is he wants us to bring us to a point where we're actually afraid that this appalling view of life, and that is an appalling view of life. He wants to bring us to a point where we think that this appalling view of life is true. He wants us to be afraid that nothing matters. He wants us to be afraid of that. He wants to drive us to despair and desperation and disillusionment because this is an awful view of life. It is a scary view of life. It is an appalling view of life. But then he wants us to know this. There's good news. There's great news. And the great news is, this isn't the only view of life. He wants us to understand that this isn't the honest view of life. That this view of life is only true if you view life under the sun. Listen, the key to understanding the book of Ecclesiastes is that expression. You will see it all throughout the book of Ecclesiastes. Take a look at it. It starts in verse 3 of chapter 1. What advantage does man have in all his work which he does under the sun? He goes down to verse 9. That which has been is that which will be, and that which has been done is that which will be done. So there is nothing new under the sun. In verse 14, he says, I have seen all the works which have been done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and striving after the wind. Look at verse 11 of chapter 2. Thus I considered all my activities which my hands had done, and the labor which I had exerted, and behold, all was vanity and striving after the wind, and there was no profit under the sun. Under the sun. Under the sun. Under the sun. As I said, that is the key to understanding the book of Ecclesiastes. Life seems so drab, and it seems so meaningless for Solomon at this point, because he doesn't look above the sun. He looks at the sun, and he looks under the sun, but he doesn't look above the sun. You know, when you look under the sun, the whole under the sun perspective, that's looking at things from an earthly perspective. That's what that means. It's an earthly point of view. It's looking everywhere for the good life, but God simply isn't not in the picture. But what we have to know, and what Solomon wants us to know, is that there is a God who is over the sun. And that God is sovereign over the sun, and He rules over the sun, and He shows us a completely different perspective. And it's a higher perspective. And if you really want the good life, then He's going to show you the good life. Now, Ecclesiastes, as I said, brings us to that above the sun perspective eventually. Listen, when you put God back in the picture, see, Solomon doesn't, like I said, he doesn't have God in the picture, but when you put God back in the picture, it changes everything about your perspective. You know, we've already seen what Solomon says about the sunrise and the sunset. Well, there it is. Look at it. It just comes up and it just goes down. And that's it. That's the perspective of the sun when you're looking at it under the sun. Now, just hold your place here in Ecclesiastes chapter 1 and turn over to Psalm 19. Let me show you a different perspective. Let me show you the perspective of someone who views life above the sun. Psalm 19, beginning in verse 1, says, the heavens are telling the glory of God, and their expanses declaring the work of His hands. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words. Their voice is not heard. Their line has gone out through all the earth, and their utterances to the end of the world. In them He has placed a tent for the sun, which is as a bridegroom coming out of his chamber. It rejoices as a strong man to run its course. Its rising is from one end of the heavens, and its circuit to the other end of them, and there is nothing hidden from its heat. So Solomon goes, yeah, look at the sun. And the psalmist goes, wow, look at the sun. Solomon, from his perspective under the sun, says it just comes up and it just comes down and nothing's accomplished. In Psalm 19, this view above the sun, he says, wow, just look at the sun and all of its glory. It just bears such witness to the glory of God and the goodness of God and the power of God. He exalts in the glory of God that is witnessed in nature. Reminds me of Psalm 113. Again, you see that perspective above the sun. In Psalm 113 and verse 3, from the rising of the sun to its setting, the name of the Lord is to be praised. Rather than seeing the day in and day out routine like Solomon, we can give the same testimony that the great African-American scientist George Washington Carver said. I love this quote. Here's what he said. He said, I love to think of nature as unlimited broadcasting stations through which God speaks to us every day, every hour, and every moment of our lives, if we will only tune in and remain so. And so almost every verse then in Ecclesiastes after this is telling us and showing us how desperately we need to have an above the sun perspective. How only when we put God in the picture and keep Him there is there any real meaning to life. Is there any real lasting satisfaction and fulfillment in life? Well, remember Groundhog Day? I didn't tell you how it ended. If you've seen it, you might remember how it ended. But if you never saw it, I'll tell you how it ended. He finally broke out of the monotonous prison. He finally stopped living February 2nd over and over and over again. You say, well, how did it happen? Well, it happened when he met a girl named Rita, and he fell in love with Rita. And he came to this point and he looked Rita in the eye and he said, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. All I know is that I'm happy right now. And he broke out of the monotonous prison. Well, that's the point of Ecclesiastes. The only way that we are ever going to have the good life, the only way that we are ever going to find the fullness of satisfaction and fulfillment is when we look at Jesus Christ in the eye and we come to know Him and we fall in love with Him. And when we fall in love with Jesus Christ, all of the monotony, all of the dissatisfaction, all of that is going to melt away. Now, that doesn't mean we're never going to have times in which there's some blues that we have. I mean, we live in a broken and fallen world. We experience pain physically. We experience pain emotionally. It's not to say our life is going to be perfect. But in the midst of this monotonous prison that is life, we find real joy and we find the good life. And we understand that there is a satisfaction in our souls that can't be found in any other place. And so if you want to surrender to the good life, then you surrender to the one above the sun. You surrender your life to Jesus Christ. You know, Jesus talked about the same thing in John chapter 4. It's the same message of Ecclesiastes. You remember John chapter 4 when he's going through Samaria and it's in the middle of the day and he stops by a well and his disciples go into town to buy food and Jesus is going to engage one of the local women there in a conversation. She's shocked because Jews don't have anything to do with Samaritans, but he asks her for a drink and she raises, just the reality of the strangeness of this situation. How could you, as a Jew, be asking me, a Samaritan woman, for a drink? And Jesus says, if you knew who was asking you for a drink, you would ask and you would receive living water. And he said, this water that you come to drink, you just have to keep coming back because it just makes you thirsty. But the living water that I provide, you'll never thirst again. And the whole point there is that we as human beings, there's this internal urge within us to find fulfillment and satisfaction, and yet we go to all of the wrong places searching for those things. In fact, he exposed for the woman how she was trying to find the good life when he said to her, go bring your husband here. And she goes, well, I'm not married. He goes, well, you're right. You're not. You've had 5 husbands, and now you have a boyfriend. He was revealing that she's trying to find fulfillment and satisfaction in relationships. Bouncing from one bad relationship to another, bouncing from one bed to another. That's how she's trying to find it. And people are always trying to find fulfillment and satisfaction under the sun in all kinds of activities and in all kinds of experiences and in all kinds of relationships. But all of those things while they may satisfy for a moment, they don't bring lasting satisfaction. Jesus says, I'm the only one. In me, you can have lasting fulfillment, and only in me. And so my question to you tonight is very, very simple. Have you fallen in love with Jesus? Do you know Jesus Christ? I don't know. I know you've got that impulse for fulfillment and satisfaction. Everybody has it. But do you understand that the only place ultimate satisfaction is found, the ultimate good life can be found, is only in Christ? He wants to give you a quenched thirst forever. And He offers Himself. He wants you to fall in love with Him, and He's done everything that He can do. Now the choice is yours. Now, the Bible tells us how we can begin this journey of falling in love with Christ and living life from an above-the-sun perspective. It begins with recognizing that He is the Christ. And if we believe that He is the one that God sent to be our sin bearer, and that He went to the cross, and that He died and was buried and rose again, if you believe that with every ounce of your being, then God calls you to surrender your life to Christ. Hand it over to Him for His control. The Bible calls that repentance. And then based on that penitent faith, God calls you to join Jesus Christ in the likeness of His atoning death in the waters of Christian baptism, and be raised in the likeness of His resurrection. And He's promised that He's going to meet you at that time and that place, and He's going to give you the living water. Sins are going to be washed away, and you're going to become part of His family. That's where real meaning is found. That's where the good life is found. It's the only place the good life is found. And so if you're looking for the good life tonight, surrender to Jesus Christ. By surrendering to Christ is the only way that you're going to find the good life. And so if you want to have received the good life tonight and you need to obey the gospel, we want to encourage that. If you need to seek the good life by coming back to Jesus Christ, do that. Maybe it's something that needs to be taken care of just between you and Jesus where you're sitting, but maybe it needs to be taken care of in more of a public way. And if that's the case, we want to encourage that. We'd love to pray with you and for you. And so if you have a need that you need to take care of tonight as you search for the good life, why don't you do it right now while together we stand and while we sing.